The first door that refused to open wasn't locked. I checked twice, then a third time, pressing the handle harder than I should have. There was no resistance, no sound of a mechanism failing, just an unresponsive stillness, like the door had decided my presence didn't require an answer. What unsettled me wasn't the refusal itself, but how calm the space around it remained, as if nothing unusual had happened at all, and the hallway expected me to accept that without question, without hesitation. I tried another door on the same floor, then one further down the corridor, expecting the problem to reveal itself as a simple malfunction. Instead, each refusal felt identical, clean and deliberate, like the doors shared the same understanding. They weren't stuck or broken. They were simply uninterested in responding to me, as if my presence no longer met whatever condition they quietly required, and the building had already reached a decision I wasn't meant to question anymore. It didn't take long before I noticed the pattern wasn't random. Doors opened easily for some people, responding instantly to their presence, while others experienced the same quiet refusal I had. Watching it happen from a distance was worse than experiencing it myself, because it made the choice feel intentional. The building wasn't malfunctioning. It was selecting who still belonged inside its flow, and quietly deciding who would have to find another way through, without ever explaining why. At first, I assumed the refusals were tied to behavior, maybe hesitation or uncertainty. But then I watched someone hesitate far longer than I had, and the door still opened for them instantly. A minute later, I saw another person move with confidence, almost impatient, and the handle didn't even twitch. That was when it became clear the decision wasn't about movement or timing. The building wasn't reacting to what people did. It was reacting to who they were, or at least to something about them that I couldn't see. Something the space recognized the way a scanner recognizes a code. Once I noticed it, I couldn't stop paying attention to how people reacted when a door refused to respond. Most of them didn't get angry or confused the way I expected. They laughed it off, blamed the mechanism, or assumed they had done something wrong without even questioning it. What disturbed me was how quickly they accepted that explanation, even when the exact same door opened immediately for the next person. It felt like the building wasn't just deciding who could pass through. It was shaping how much doubt people were allowed to feel about those decisions, quietly teaching them not to argue with the outcome. After that, I started paying attention to moments when the doors did open, trying to understand what separated acceptance from refusal. The difference wasn't visible, and it wasn't something people seemed aware of. Those who passed through didn't look relieved or surprised. They walked forward as if the door had never been an obstacle at all. Watching that contrast unsettled me more than the refusals themselves, because it suggested the building wasn't simply denying access. It was making the process invisible for those it chose to acknowledge. What made everything worse was realizing that people who were accepted never noticed the pattern at all. They moved through the doors without hesitation, without resistance, without even slowing down. For them, the building behaved exactly as expected, predictable and obedient. The refusals only existed for those who experienced them, isolated moments that couldn't be proven or shared. It created a quiet separation, not between floors or rooms, but between people who were acknowledged by the space and those who were slowly being excluded without any visible sign. I began to realize that being refused wasn't the most disturbing part of what was happening. What truly unsettled me was how invisible the exclusion was to everyone else. No alarm sounded, no signs appeared, and no one questioned the process. The building didn't need to justify its choices, because the people it accepted never saw reason to doubt them, and the ones it refused were left alone with the experience, forced to either accept it quietly or convince themselves it had never really happened. That night I tested it on purpose. I waited near the stairwell and watched people come and go, counting the seconds between their approach and the door's response. For most of them, the handle moved before their hand even settled, like the building anticipated them. Then one man stepped forward, confident, familiar, exactly the kind of person the space should have recognized, and the door did nothing. He tried again, smiled awkwardly, then stepped back as if embarrassed by an invisible mistake. When it opened immediately for the next person, I felt something cold tighten in my chest because the choice had just revealed itself in public. After that moment, I stopped thinking of the doors as simple boundaries. They felt more like filters, quietly sorting people without explanation or appeal. No one protested for long, and no one demanded answers because nothing looked wrong on the surface. The building remained clean, orderly, and calm, which made the decisions harder to argue with. It was easier for everyone to assume the fault belonged to the person being refused, rather than consider the possibility that the space itself had begun to judge who deserved to move forward. The longer I stayed there, the more I realized the refusals were changing how people behaved around each other. When someone struggled with a door, others avoided eye contact, pretending not to notice. No one offered help, not because they were cruel, but because acknowledging the refusal felt uncomfortable. It was easier to look away and move on. Watching that happen made me understand that the building wasn't just filtering access. It was slowly teaching everyone inside how to ignore the people it no longer wanted to recognize. I started to wonder how long someone could remain inside the building once the doors stopped responding to them. There were no announcements, no clear moment of exclusion, just a growing sense of inconvenience that pushed people away piece by piece. Elevators skipped floors, doors delayed their response, and corridors felt longer than they should have. It was subtle, almost polite, but the result was the same. The building didn't force anyone out. It simply made staying feel unnecessary. What frightened me most was realizing how easy it would be for someone to disappear inside a place like this. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, through small inconveniences that no one felt responsible for noticing. A door that didn't open, a hallway that felt longer, an elevator that never seemed to arrive. Piece by piece, the building could make a person less visible without ever announcing it. And the worst part was knowing that if it happened to someone else, I might not notice either. I began to feel the building watching me in ways that had nothing to do with cameras or sensors. It wasn't observing my movements so much as my tolerance for being delayed, ignored, or quietly redirected. Each time I accepted a refusal without questioning it, the next one came faster. Doors hesitated longer, corridors offered fewer options, and familiar routes stopped feeling reliable. It was as if the space was testing how much inconvenience I would accept before I stopped expecting to be acknowledged at all. The last door I tested didn't refuse me outright. It opened slowly, reluctantly, as if reconsidering the decision mid-motion. Standing there, watching the gap widen, I realized the building wasn't deciding who to exclude anymore. It was deciding who to keep. Everyone else wasn't being pushed out. They were being allowed to drift away unnoticed. And as I stepped through that doorway, feeling the space finally respond to me again, I understood something far worse than refusal. Being accepted didn't mean you were safe. It meant the building had decided you were worth keeping inside.